Hi everyone, I'm Katrina and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in the month of January. I finished a total of 8 books this month, which I'm really happy about, especially considering I read absolutely nothing in December, so I was playing a little bit of catch up, finishing some books that I had started last year. I also participated in the biannual Bibliothon and I will be putting up my reading vlog for that week very soon, but I read a total of 6 books during that week, which definitely helped overall in the month. Why don't we just get straight into the books that I read and what I thought of them. Tinder by Sally Gardner. This one I gave about 3 stars and I chose this for the biannual Bibliothon reading challenge to read a book you've never heard of before. So I went to my local library and picked up pretty much a book at random, or at least one that the cover kind of intrigued me and one that I hadn't heard of before, so I didn't actually read the synopsis. And I think that if I'd gone into this knowing it was a retelling of The Tinderbox, which I haven't read myself, I'm not really familiar with that story, I might have enjoyed it a little bit more. I just don't think I was expecting it to be so fairy tale-esque, and it kind of took me a little bit by surprise, and it took me a little while to really get into the groove of it. And don't get me wrong, I do really enjoy fairy tales, particularly like the dark Christian Andersen and Grimm fairy tales, but it just wasn't what I expected. Not that I really expected much going into it not knowing anything about the book. It just took me a little bit by surprise. This one does also have illustrations scattered throughout, which I did quite enjoy. It was definitely a dark and kind of eerie story, which I liked, but just didn't love. Fullmetal Alchemist volumes 19 through 21 by Hiromu Arakawa. I've been really enjoying the Fullmetal Alchemist series so far. It has been a little while since I picked up the volume before this, so when I did start, it did take a little while for me to get back into the story. I was confused for a little bit there, wondering who half of the characters were, what had happened in the story, because there are a lot of complex things going on. We are kind of jumping around between different groups of characters whose stories all obviously intertwine, but it took me a little while to kind of wrap my head around everything. That was a little bit of a shame, so I think because of that I didn't enjoy this quite as much as I have enjoyed the other books in the series. That being said though, we are getting very near the end of Fullmetal Alchemist, and I think that at this point in the story we are kind of starting to prepare for the finale and building up to the climax, but I think it's like the very beginning of getting there. So I found this one a little bit slower than the other ones. There wasn't quite as much of that humor that I absolutely have been enjoying. Still really enjoying this one. I gave it also a 3 out of 5 stars. Not my favorite of the series, but I do need to kick myself into gear and actually finish the last few volumes sooner rather than later because of how many things do happen in the story, so I don't want to forget everything before I get to the end and then I'm just like, wait, what? Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo, the sequel to Shadow and Bone. This is another 3-star read. I didn't enjoy this quite as much as the first book in the series, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, there are some pretty high intensity moments in the book, some really exciting scenes. But between those moments, I found the story and the pacing to lull a little bit, at least for my taste. So as we were kind of plodding along through the story, waiting for the next big thing to happen, sometimes, only a couple of times though, I did find myself getting a little bit bored. The other reason why I didn't enjoy this quite as much as Shadow and Bone is because of the characters. First of all, we see more of a character who I do not like, which is Mal. I don't have any time for Mal. And we see less of probably my favorite character in the series, which is the Darkling. He's just such a fascinating character, and I wanted a little bit more of him in this book. Alas, we did not get that. We had Mal instead. With that said though, the one thing I really enjoyed about this book in terms of the characters was meeting Nikolai, who I think is probably my second favorite character, close to it anyway. I just really enjoyed the time we spent with Nikolai in this book. Such a funny character. I really enjoyed the banter between him and Alina, and I'm really hoping we get to see a lot more of him in the 3rd book as well. I will be a little bit sad if we don't. I am planning on reading Ruin and Rising very soon, so you'll get to hear my thoughts on the 3rd book in this trilogy shortly. I also read Otherworld by Jason Segel and Kirsten Miller. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars, and this was the group book for the biannual Bibliothon, which means that we did do a live show at the end of the readathon talking about this book in a little more detail. So if you have read the book and are interested in some of my thoughts, spoilery thoughts on this book as well as the other girls that participated in the readathon, I will have a link to that live show down below. I'm not sure how much to say about the actual story. I went into this not knowing much at all because the synopsis on the back doesn't reveal very much about the book, but there is this virtual reality game called Otherworld, and we follow a main character, Simon, who starts to play Otherworld, but there's a lot more going on than that. how do I put this? He goes on a bit of a rescue mission adventure quest. I really enjoyed this book. I found it to be quite a lot of fun. I listened to the audiobook which Jason Segel narrated. I think he did a really good job. Would definitely recommend listening to it if you have the means to do so. The main character is a really interesting one. Simon is definitely a flawed character. There were some things about his personality and some things that he did in this book that I absolutely didn't like. He has this almost obsessive mentality going in and kind of saving the damsel in distress. And there are some other things that were kind of frustrating at times, but I also really kind of almost liked that about his character. I really appreciated that he was flawed, and although some of the things he did I didn't agree with or I might not have liked, I think it really worked for the story. Made it more compelling and intriguing. One of my other favorite things about this was definitely exploring some of the realms of Otherworld, the virtual reality game itself. Some of the different areas, how people interact, some of the things to see and do there. I found it to be really fun to actually explore that a little bit more, especially towards the kind of second half of the book, because at the beginning we are getting more of, you know, the real life happenings on rather than being solely immersed in Otherworld. Neverland by Margot McGovern. This one I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars. Also in January, I attended the Penguin Teen Showcase. Margot McGovern was one of the authors that attended. There was a little bit of a Q&A session, so it was really great to hear from her some of the influences behind the story and things like that. She is a debut Australian author and it was her first kind of public appearance talking about the book, so it was also one of the first times that I heard a little bit more about the story other than what was on the synopsis. I also want to mention some trigger warnings for self-harm, suicide, eating disorders, and abuse as well. So with that said, it is definitely a hard-hitting book, some really intense moments as well. The main character Kit, after she attempts to take her life, her psychiatrist uncle brings her back to her home island, which has been turned into a boarding school for teens with mental illnesses. And we do get to see a lot of mental health rep in here as well. In terms of the main characters that we follow that are students that are living at this boarding school, not the actual psychiatrists, we have Kit, who had attempted to take her own life. She's suffering from some pretty traumatic things that happened in her past, and some of her other close friends, one of them has an eating disorder, the other one is a psychopath as well. And with my own experiences, I can't really speak for the accuracy of the representation of those different mental illnesses, but with my interpretation of the book, I don't think this villainized any of those characters. They felt really human, really realistic, and overall, I really enjoyed this book and getting to know a lot of the characters. I am planning on doing a spoiler-free review of this one, which will go a little bit more into my thoughts of it, so you can also look out for that. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. This is the illustrated edition that I have had since it came out. The day of publication for this, I picked this book up and it's taken me this long to finally read the illustrated edition. Obviously this is a reread. I adore the Harry Potter series and I've been wanting to reread them so I can enjoy the illustrations as well, which I thought were a great addition to the story. Really loved the style of the illustrations as well. Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire. This is the third book in the Wayward Children series. Book 2 was more of a companion prequel, but Beneath the Sugar Sky does continue on from book 1, Every Heart a Doorway. We do have a different main character, but we do see some of the same characters that we met in the first book as well, which is great to see. I gave book 2 a 4.75 rating and I'm hovering between 4.75 and a 5 on this one because I can't tell which one I liked more. I liked them for very different reasons. Down Among the Sticks and Bones was really dark and eerie, and it was really fun exploring one of the worlds that the characters are transported into. We do get to see some more worlds in this one, and we do still get a lot of the same kind of darker elements and themes, but it still felt more light in this one based on some of the settings that we get to explore and the characters that we meet as well. I really liked Cora, our main character, and with her we also get some fat representation. Again, can't speak for the accuracy of the rep, but from what I've heard from other people so far, it seems to be really good representation, which is always a great thing to hear. These books are just so magical and fantastical, and considering how small they are, there is so much squashed into these novellas, and I think Seanan McGuire does a really good job of bringing these characters and these worlds to life. The last book that I'm going to be talking about today is Morningstar by Pierce Brown, the third book in the Red Rising trilogy or series, whatever it now is. I don't think it'll come as a surprise that I really enjoyed this final book. It did take me a little while to read this one, but I don't attribute that to the book at all. It was more my mental space, really. I wasn't reading much at all in December, as I mentioned, so it did take me a little while to read this. In all honesty, it was probably good that I did take it a little bit slow because this was an action-packed, high intensity finale. My poor heart had to deal with so much reading this book. It was shattered and it tried to put it back together but then just stomped on it. It was a roller coaster ride, not only reading this but the series as a whole, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to getting into Iron Gold soon, but I think I am also going to start listening to the audiobooks of the series. I'm going to reread Red Rising and listen to the audiobook. I think I'm going to really enjoy it. I would highly recommend this series, especially if you do like really fast-paced, action-packed, twisty and turny books that you just don't know what to expect next. If that sounds up your alley, I would recommend these. So those were all of the books that I read in the month of January. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, but that's pretty much all that I have for now. I will see you very soon in my upcoming video, my February TBR, which will be going up later today. But until then, I will talk to you all in the comments. Bye!